Hello and welcome to the Creativity Couch. We're your hosts and creativity agony aunts, and along with special guests, we're here to answer all your creativity challenges, conflicts and conundrums as we take a deep dive into the sweet and salty realities of creativity and living a creative life. No topic is off limits, so make yourself a cuppa and come join us on the Creativity Couch.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Creativity Couch. I'm Anna from Mama Creatives.
And I'm Christina from Creative Consultancies.
And today we have our special guest is Cynthia, and she is the editor and pretty much the creator and the all-round amazing, brilliant woman who's created Yoke Magazine, which is about creativity and consciousness. She's also a photographer and a wonderful presenter and speaker on things that are important in the world. And so we thought she would be exceptional for our first series on the Creativity Couch because our theme today is about art and activism.
Just love it. It's so beautiful.
It is beautiful.
I just can't present it.
And the different issues of the magazine have different themes. So this
Can we
particular
just
theme...
flick open some of the pages? Because
Sure.
there's so much attention to detail. Like it's so just beautiful, like paper stock and like where's your beautiful, like all your each little section, like not just even the photos.
So do you want to, before we get into the whole podcast, do you want to share a little bit about why you started Yoke and what the sort of the main impetus is for why you started Yoke? Wasn't our first question, we're going off.
We're going off tangent already.
You said we can't go off tangent.
risk. Anna's really good at staying on track. I'm not so skilled in that
Okay,
area.
let's give
Going
Cynthia...
off tangent.
keep us
Okay,
on
5
track.
minutes. 5 minutes.
2 minutes on
2
why
minutes.
you started
Yeah,
Yoke,
2
and then we'll get
seconds.
back.
2 seconds. Truthfully, I was sick of bumping into people on their mobile phones, and I wanted to get into something that was tangible, and I wanted to collaborate, and I was a lonely photographer. And so to me, I reached out for two things that rocked my world that I was in, which was creativity and consciousness.
Okay.
Yoga.
Yoga.
Yeah. I was going to ask, like, what do you mean by consciousness
Yeah.
exactly? Like,
So
what?
it ultimately yoga.
Okay.
Yeah. And the ancient philosophies and yogic wisdoms, I guess,
wisdom.
which, we talk about it as mindfulness.
Yeah.
But being present in the world that is ultimately about how we connect and how we connect to ourselves and each other and our planet.
And the content and the way you curate the content for the magazine is really beautiful. So you have long form interviews with very inspiring people, and you talk about different themes. So each magazine has a different theme. This one particular one is duty. So can you tell us how you curate those really inspiring people and get your themes?
Yeah, I think the broadness of the idea of art and philosophy, or art and ancient philosophies, is ultimately large. So I hone it in with a theme. And each theme to me really is a very spontaneous thing. It's actually something that I personally want to explore myself.
Right.
So for me, duty and activism, I think anybody that's on the yoga mat needs to be an activist. And in many ways, they're the ones that kind of are leading because they're the ones practicing every day, hopefully, in how to actually be in tune with yourself and in turn, how to be in the world. So I think that I think that the themes are very kind of like present in terms of what's happening here and now.
Fantastic, I love that.
The other themes were around, the first theme was around love and loss, so we kind of talked about death and love and losing love and all that. And then there was balance, the elusive word balance, and then the third was around gather, so ultimately community. And so when you're able to kind of have a theme, then it's really easy to see what's going on in the world. There's so many people doing great stuff around, so that's how I
So
do
beyond the magazine, so we've got Yoke, which is Y-O-K-E, which comes from the yogic.
Yeah, it's
Yoke.
a Sanskrit. The Sanskrit word is yuj, and it's basically to yoke, to come together, which means yoga, to unite, body, mind, soul.
And so just before we get into the question, just further to that, Cynthia started these suppers unyoked, which is where you're getting people gathering around your beautiful table in your beautiful home, and you're bringing together thought leaders and interesting people to listen to other massively inspiring people, to take this consciousness, to take this activism and get them actioning it. And so you get these great people together.
Yeah.
I've got my hair's gone all like in the back of my head. We don't muck around here on the
it's great.
creativity couch, do we, with the awesome people that come in?
We're bringing in the giants today, the titans of creativity. But I've been to a couple of these beautiful gatherings, and the point of that was to take this into the real world.
Yeah. Take the pages, to take the content out of the pages and into that face-to-face conversation, and ultimately, when you reach out and you ask somebody to interview, you've kind of already started to build your network of people, and it's so amazing because not only do a lot of them say yes, majority say yes to being interviewed, but a lot of them say yes to coming to dinner.
Yeah, that's great.
So the last one was Reverend Graham Long from the Wayside Chapel, who's I'm a big fan of, and I'm involved in the inner sanctum of Wayside, and I have done for a long time. But to invite him to dinner and to talk to dinner guests was a whole other buzz, and again with the suppers I hone it in with a theme.
Yep.
And so this year I've been exploring love, beauty, and belonging. The kind of the pillars of what makes us whole.
And it's beautiful, and the people you bring together are really handpicked and beautiful as well. It's open to anybody, but the people who take that invitation and actually go are really amazing as well. So you can meet really wonderful people. I love the idea of dinner parties, and
same.
And it's such a great way to nurture and to communicate and to connect. So I want to move into the first question that we generally ask all our guests.
How amazing is this tea, by the way?
Oh my goodness.
Super nice.
Well, before we ask the question, let's just do a little bit of a pucker cuppa on the couch. So we've got our pucker. I've got love. What have you got?
I got love.
Because I've kind of
you got love too.
Oh my god.
No, I Revitalise. I'm a bit of a fan of the Revitalise. I keep coming back to Revitalise.
Well, you're getting your energy because we
I
can
am
be pumping out the podcast.
Look at this.
And
excuse me, with my Yoke Magazine and my pocketeer. Only I had some chocolate to have with it as well.
Oh,
I do.
Oh, mustard. Colour coordinated. Alter Echo have been sponsoring Mama Creatives for
Oh,
years.
they're my favourite.
Aren't they great?
They're so my favourite.
Do you
Are we
want a
going to open it?
Yeah, which one do you want? Do you want the brown
I
butter
want
or
the
the
brown
toffee?
butter. Brown butter.
Good, because that one's vegan for the vegan-y time out there. For my fellow vegans. Hello.
Somehow you love, because I kind of love Cynthia. She's a wonderful person.
Love.
You kind of love her.
Well,
You're
totally sure
well, it's I love you a lot.
I already love you a lot, Cynthia.
I've known you for So what I want to say, the big question that I want to ask you is, what does creativity mean to you?
Oh, Jesus. What is it? Break it down. Okay, do you want it in a nutshell? Or do you want to I'll break it down. Or maybe I need some chocolate before we break it down. I think creativity is one fundamental piece of life that I think... Oh, thank you. This is creativity.
Yeah, true, totally.
I think we need more creative minds. Mm-hmm. I think we need creativity in a way that we've never needed it before.
Why is that? Can you... I know. This is really. I know you're going down to a great.
I
path.
feel like we've had amazing help from our lovely friend Vicky too. So even though you can't see her, I'm going to hand her some chocolate because
Of course, Vicky, you can just help yourself to any number of blocks over there. So getting back to creativity, so I want to just keep the flow on this, because I know you're moving into this sort of creativity, as in this greater philosophy.
Yeah, well, creativity is a way to kind of live your life, and I think for me, I turn to creativity as a way to nourish myself. I turn to creativity as a way to be with others and make them feel good. I turn to creativity as a way to, think outside the square. I turn to creativity to be a better person.
How do you consciously turn to creativity? What are you actually doing to say, okay, how does that look in your life, in your conscious, unconscious being?
Creativity comes in many forms. For me it comes in, a magazine that I produce, but it also comes in a creative way in which I explore my house and how it feels, food, creativity in my morning pages. I dip in and out, but I do a little bit of writing.
So that's like the Artist's Way style morning pages. I'll put the link in the notes for peeps.
Yeah, I've come across that maybe 20 years ago, and I dip in and out of it. But to have, I guess, creativity for me is about ritual.
Okay. Okay.
And it's about
So go back to your yogic practice.
Yeah, it goes back to my yogic practice, but it also keeps me, as a photographer who freelances and is independent in my work, as in I don't, show up every day to an office or to a team. I have to have routine, and to me, routine comes with ritual. So I go back to my prayer, and I go back to my yoga mat, and I go back to my writing.
I really like that, because I think a lot of people think creativity is this free-flowing thing that just comes to you whenever you feel like it. But actually, you have to create ritual, and you have to create a practice, and you have to kind of work at it sometimes. It's not just you're inspired all the time. It's the opposite. You need to actually create the space for the creativity to be present. And it's this more conscious way. And I think you get the sort of hit of creativity, inspiration, that doesn't come as often as people think. You're not up all night sweating and writing your novel. It actually takes a lot of effort. You have to create the space.
There's that great quote, I think maybe it's Picasso or someone, that's sort of like that creativity needs to find you working. Like, as in, you need to be available when it turns up. You need to be open.
You need to show up every day, right?
You need to
show up every day.
If you want it to be in your life and be present, you need to make space for it.
And also value it as a really important component.
As a life value.
Yeah, that's right,
Prioritise
Have you
it.
always been creative?
What's your childhood? Did you have a creative upbringing, or did it come to you later on?
I think my mother was creative. I certainly didn't. I didn't grow up in a, I grew up in a very beige house in suburbia, concrete jungle.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And
I can't imagine
it's
you
probably
ever being
why.
beige yourself.
No,
so how did that feel?
Well, I struggled, and it's probably why I went to creativity actually, or to colour, because I grew up in such a beige house. Having said that, my mother was always doing something creative. She was always going off and taking herself off to courses, doll making and mosaicing and like
70s?
stitching and
My mother too. My mother used art classes and all sorts of stuff.
And although I kind of like poo-pooed a lot of what she did, it was I witnessed it. And
we normalise creativity actually in a way.
It's great. So I want to, this is a great precursor to the question, because it's given us a great understanding of where you're about, and this is why we brought you in for our epic question.
Oh, geez.
You're kind of an epic woman.
Too kind.
So, do you want to read out the creativity challenge?
I like being the letter reader.
You are the letter.
I know, I have been.
I'm giving you that role.
I have. I'm happy
taking
with
that
it.
role.
I've embraced this
You've
role.
embraced the role.
My work is very focused around the environment and bringing to light our relationship with nature. I'm really passionate. What did I do?
Just loving.
Okay.
With love. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, I liked it. Sorry, everyone. I'm really passionate about getting people to connect with that part in themselves that is wild and natural, to get people thinking and being more aware. But sometimes I'm criticised because my work doesn't offer direct solutions. How do I address this with people? I feel like it's my job to tell the story but not offer all the answers. What is my role here? Do I need to be an activist as well as an artist?
Oh gosh, love it. What's your first thoughts on that?
Yeah, first thing.
What comes to mind?
Look, what comes to mind is the quote by Maya Angelou, which I've just forgotten. She says something like, it's our duty. It's our duty as artists. But what are we talking about? Is she an artist that does that as that's her sole thing? She's already kind of an activist because she works in the environmental world.
I guess that's what I'm hearing in that she feels like she's having conversations about it, but it's like she's opening conversations. She's not there saying this is the way we solve this. She's just saying, like, connect with this, or this is important, or environment. That's what I'm understanding.
I think sometimes people feel that to find an answer or solution, it needs to be this concrete fact. And not always is the answer a fact. Sometimes it comes from poetry and it comes from other ways. And it reminds me of what you said, what you sent me.
Oh, with the Nina Simone.
It's an artist's duty is to reflect the times. And I think that it is true of painters, sculptors, poets, musicians. As far as I'm concerned, it's their choice. But I choose to reflect the times and situations in which I find myself. That, to me, is my duty. And at this crucial time in our lives, when everything is so desperate, when every day is a matter of survival, I don't think you can help but be involved. Young people, black and white, know this. That's why we are so involved in politics. We will shape and mould this country or it will not be moulded and shaped at all. So I don't think you have a choice. How can you be an artist and not reflect the times? That to me is the definition of an artist. Now she said that decades ago, and it's still true.
Yeah.
And you said that to me, and I thought it's very interesting, and it might speak to a lot of what this woman, or also that sort of general universal expectation and our duty.
Yeah, it is our duty. I mean, the last issue of Yoke was themed duty, and it was an exploration of like, what is it our duty? What is our duty?
As creative people,
as humans, you know. I think creativity and art, and you know, we're all creative, and we can all be creative. And when we talk about creativity, you know, we talk about how do we create a different world. That's my like, you know,
nice,
buzz. Like, how can creativity really create change?
I feel that too. I feel like it's the way to create change.
Yeah. There's a big movement now sweeping up.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, Elizabeth
work.
Gilbert and her book Big Magic, and, you know, Noula, Diamantopoulos, who's also a creative and an artist and has written a book, Be Creative, you know. So there's lots of those two that I kind of go to.
They'll be in the show notes.
And there's lots about the environment, and there's this woman who was interviewed on Being with Krista Tippett, and her name escapes me, but we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
It talks exactly about this.
Yeah,
she's an environmental activist, and she's a conscious activist.
But what if you're like...
But if you're not...
But if you don't identify, like...
Yeah.
Even if, like, your body of work is about these things, but you don't necessarily identify as an activist, it's like, can you still create social change without, like...
Maybe we need to
where's
define...
that line between saying I am an arts... Like, I am an activist, and part of my process is I do that through my artwork, like, in that very direct way, like someone like Midnight Oil did, where not only did they take a stand on every level of what they were doing, the way they travelled rurally, the way they turned up at events, but even the content of their songs, they were very explicit about being activists, whereas it sounds like for her activism is implicit in the work. She's not sort of saying, here I am driving this point home and this political agenda, like in a kind of Midnight Oil way, but does that still count?
Maybe we need to define what activism means.
Counts?
How do you
Well, it's
see
interesting
activism?
because I mean, I never, for the longest time, and in many ways, you know, in the real word, in the real meaning of the word activism, you know, am I an activist? For me, activism shows up in a way that is about, for me, planting seeds and recognising all the other people that are doing this amazing work in the world, right? So I don't get up there and you know, wave flags and have flags up on my home, or, you know, I go to the occasional rally, but what my way of showing up is to highlight all the amazing people that are making change, that are game changers in the world,
and gathering them
and highlighting them to create momentum, but also to create, you know, what they're doing is ultimately planting seeds as well. You know, it's that shifting of consciousness that you know, we all have things that we can stand for. There is so much going on in this world right now that is unjust, and this is what, you know, what this is where I go, and this is where I started when I read this, that 1% of our population own half the wealth of this world. Like, to me, that is enough, full stop. We all have a job to do, you know, like, we cannot pretend that that isn't happening. You know, that in itself is a really wrong stat, and there's something fundamentally wrong with it. So, you know, I think we can all stand for something, and we don't, not necessarily in a way that's, you know, political, but I think collectively we need to show up differently. We can't rely on our governments
I think
anymore.
that's the point. People think that activism is political, but it is political if you stand for something. It's just not like governmental politics as such.
Right.
But I think activism can be if you believe in something and it's really important to you, and you put work out into the world and you express that, you externalize that opinion, it can come through your art.
I I was listening again to another podcast the other day. I was listening to Russell Brand talking with Jamil. How do you say her name? That's in The Good Place, the actress who's done a lot of work around body image and stuff. But they were actually, no, it might have even been him and Brene Brown, or maybe a combination of both. Anyway, everything he talks about is amazing. Might have been, but I think actually it was him and Brene Brown. And they were talking about, I think you need to get Russell on the couch next. Oh my God, we totally do, Russell. We totally need to be here. Brene, Jamil, all of you, come on the couch.
Russell, we'll take you. And Brene.
It's Bondi Beach, Russell.
Yeah.
Bondi
Next
Beach.
time it'll be Byron. So that's like super
2 chicks, 3 chicks.
Yeah.
We'll invite a lot of chicks.
Everyone can come.
And Brene, I probably would take Brene before Russell, though.
Oh, I don't know. They're both so good. Anyway,
so
they were talking about this idea. I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was Brene and Russell. That this idea about the right kind of looks for allies and the left sort of like looks almost for enemies. Like this sense that like this left agenda, which we're gonna assume that a lot of artists are more towards that side of like that kind of liberal. Open, inclusive environment, like that set of values. But there tends to be a less collegiate way of approaching these things because everyone's so like it's this all or nothing. Like you know, like isn't it enough that she's telling stories about the environment with someone saying that's not enough? Like I feel like how do we support artists to tell the part of the story they're happy with without feeling like, well, if you're not going to go the whole hog and like, you know, be on the front line, then you're not enough of, it's not enough of activism, or it's not a big enough, like if you're not Midnight Oil on the front line, it's not enough. And how do we support artists to do the bit that they want to do?
Innately we can't all be game changers.
Yeah.
You know, like innately that's not what we're all here to do. You know,
it's true. We don't all have those leadership qualities.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Take that leadership
and I
role.
think we can all be activists in our own way. Like plastics. It's not hard to go no single-use plastics. Actually, I'm going to say no to all plastics. You know, like that's
an active. That's
a form of
choice.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So I think that in many ways, you know, as an artist, I think you have to dig deep for there to be relevance and for there to be vulnerability and for there to be a response, a genuine response from the audience to your art. Otherwise, it just becomes like...
Are you talking about artists who are professional artists and
define
themselves as artists, or people who create? You're talking about...
No, I'm talking about artists
who identify as being
yes,
an
that's right.
Filmmakers.
Yeah. Like our letter writer.
Yeah, I think our letter writer is saying that she's an artist.
Yeah. So it's their career, and then so therefore when they produce something, it has to have meaning. And in that action, therefore, there's some sort of activism around it.
Yeah, and there has to be like a sense of going deep. I mean, not everyone can be an artist that is going to change the world. But I think that if you go deep and you really understand what's important to you, your art will come out through those questions.
We talked about.
How can she hold her ground in that sense? Like if someone's sort of like, because effectively, then it's almost like them saying your level of talking about this is not enough. It's not good. You know, like if that's what she's, you know,
She's really passionate. She said she's really passionate about getting people to connect with that part in themselves that is wild and natural. So if she's really passionate about it, then maybe for her just creating doesn't feel enough, and she's not feeling she's getting the reaction that's enough for her. Like it's hard to know how she defines enough.
But how does she address this with people? That's the question. How does she address
I think she just has to...
being a bit of a hater, like kind of like, yeah, all very well that you're kind of like talking about. Yeah, but
there's going to be
those
kind of people all the time, right? I mean, I think you just need to show up and lead by example.
Yeah.
And it sounds like she's already doing that.
If she wants to be really practical about it, she might already, but if her work's shown in a gallery setting or in some type of space, she could have artist talks and talk about the story. She could have some type of not magazine, but at least some sort of printout about the story behind it. So if she's more introverted, she can have something for people to read about the history of why she's doing what she's doing. So if you expect people just to understand it by looking at it, maybe she could take that and describe it, if if she's talking about something a little bit more practical.
Just to deepen that.
And get the curator or the director of the gallery to have some events or workshops or talks around it if it's an important discussion, and educate people about the environment that she's specifically working on. So her work has then created that ripple effect, so the other people who are better at that type of thing are then going to describe it, and that's what a lot of galleries do. They have these great events, and
do you feel like if she's going to take that much step, like she said, does she need to be an activist as well as an artist? Does she need to take that extra, if that's what she cares about, and if, like, as creators we have these platforms, like, are we obliged to? Do we have a moral responsibility? Do we all need to do that? Like, is she wasting her opportunity by not going deeper with this? Like, what is our responsibility, I suppose, as artists?
There's a quote in there by one of my gurus, Vandana Shiva, who, if you don't know who she is, you need to know who she is. She says, show notes. She says that, actually, let me read it out, because I'll read it out by verbatim rather than make it up. But I think for me, it's about how she says, I've never seen duty as a burden. I've seen it as as defining who you are. Who we are is part of a complex web of relationships that make up life, and so I don't think it's a burden. I think it's just who we need to be, and we all come uniquely with our own special gifts, and she clearly does too. So, it's like you need to stand up for something, yes, but how you do that is your choice,
I find it an interesting thing too, in terms of, like, I know with my own work, every now and then I worked with migrant and refugee communities in Western Sydney for quite a number of years, and it was in a very fraught time for those communities. It was like politically, it was like at the height, like it's pretty bad how we are with refugees and migrants now. It was even worse in that particular moment, if you can believe it. And I know I wrote this one song, as I'm a songwriter, in response to it, and I always felt like it was a bit of unusual. Like, I don't identify myself as so I certainly in my work and in my ethos, like, like I am the cliched lefty vegan, kind of hippie person in my day-to-day life, but I don't necessarily talk that much about it, like in a very explicit way, music-wise, and I always felt this self-consciousness when I would introduce that song and what it was about, to like, how can we be inclusive with polarizing political views? Can we be inclusive, or do we have to, if we are going to talk about those things, do we have to accept that we're just going to, like, piss some people off? Like, how do we walk this line? And can we walk it? Because I always used to feel slightly, like, conscious, because I'm in the folky scene too, so you get quite a lot of, like, country fans along, and they're typically quite afraid of migrant refugee communities. So I was like, I didn't want to upset them or tread on their toes or make them feel judged, but I did feel that this was a reality for me to tell this story. So how do we walk this line that we don't want to, I don't want to be polarizing, even though I'm very lefty, like, I am vegan, and I know that even veganism can be this really polarizing thing. Like, it's like, whatever anyone else wants to do, this is a choice that I've made for me, and in the same way. So how can you, is it even possible? I don't even know. Is it possible? What do you reckon? Can we?
I think this is my, I totally hear you, and I battle with that as well, because I can be quite feisty around my ideas, and I've learnt how to not be so black and white. And particularly now with our real, there's serious issues that are happening now in the world where we are divided, seriously divided like never before, where family members have very different political views to yourself. And suddenly your family members become the other. And you can't understand why or how they could have those kind of political views that aren't about equality and unity and fairness, and ultimately for me, I feel like that deeper listening and deeper conversations and more tolerance
Absolutely.
is where I come personally, where I come from. Hence, actually, the dinner parties and the unyoked suppers is that I believe we need to bring back the dinner table. That's for sure. So we can start sharing stories.
And we need to give people a place at that table.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is, you can't please everybody. You can be educated though, because even though we have our own opinions, there are other people that are going to expand your mind as well beyond what your first impressions are of where they stand for in the world. So they might vote for someone, but everyone has a story. I think there's with songwriting and with all this storytelling opportunity, and I think when you meet someone, they all have a story, and I think it comes from patience and tolerance and self-respect and compassion and all these values, and you can't assume that because someone does something that they're something else. And I think having that tolerance and acceptance will expand the conversation, and then the way to deal with people is not through conflict or anger, it's through
empathy.
Through empathy. And if artists and creatives and people who maybe be a bit more flexible, I have a very religious brother, and he's very specific in the way that he lives his life, and so you have to fit into how he lives, but he won't respect how I choose to live. It's all there. It's all how he wants, but I know that. So I'm not going to do something that's going to rock his boat, because he's not going to change. But I can be cool about that because I've chosen to understand that's where he's from. And so it's about, if you can be flexible and tolerant and empathetic, then maybe you can allow for broader opportunities for people to communicate, to connect, to converse, to have dinner together. I mean, there are, art can cross all boundaries, whether you can have language or whether you have political opinions that are opposing or whether you have different beliefs. When you get together through the art making, so many great things can happen, and that's the beginning of the activism, and that's where you can actually educate people. I was listening to this great podcast with Oprah the other day about
not that we want to distract people from listening to
from
our
podcast,
podcast, but there's so many good ones out there.
But she was talking about when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
And she talked about how on her show years ago, she used to bring in all sorts of extreme people, and she brought in these neo-Nazi white supremacists, and they were just really, really racist and aggressive and naive and horrible, actually. And she said that day she decided that that type of dark energy, she doesn't want her show to be a platform for these people to actually recruiting people to come join their movement. And then she did a 25-year anniversary of her show, and it was suggested that she bring back these people. Where are they now? And she was a bit unsure about it because she didn't want to bring in that negative energy. I mean, she was the one who started this whole sort of spiritual journey and bringing it into the mainstream in a way. But what had happened to these men was that one of them had gone to jail, and he was in an all-black group. And through them, he learnt he was educated. He wasn't racist. He actually turned his life around completely. And the irony, as Oprah said, is that, he was this white supremacist who got schooled by a black group of men in prison. And now he's so regretful. He came on the show and he apologised to her. He apologised to everybody. They were crying. It was amazing. Wow. And so they totally turned themselves around. And that was an example of when you know better, you do better. So he was naive with the way he'd been brought up. Then he had learnt that humans are humans and it doesn't matter how they look. And he learnt that. And he changed. Not everybody can. But I think you've got to have that education. And the best way to educate is through art, creativity, conversation, not through anger and through...
Yeah. Can I add to that, though? I think, going back to yoga... Yoga is an amazing tool to simply, through breath, to go back to yourself.
True. Which
in turn is about going back to the world. So, finding yourself through breath. There's no better way, I think, no easier way than through yoga and meditation to actually find empathy. Because once you recognise that I am the same as you and that you are worthy to find yourself and your place in the world like I am, then there's an immediate empathy and an immediate connection. You know, that you are just like me.
True.
And so...
But where's the activism in that?
This is the question.
Well, I think that's the beginning. I think, you know,
know yourself.
Yeah, you've got to know yourself first. You know, you've got to actually give yourself the worth and the respect and the non-harmness before you can give it to anybody else. And that takes showing up every day to some sort of practice, right? And for me, it's a yoga mat and it's meditation. Like, you know, I would probably be an asshole if I wasn't on the yoga mat. You know, like, seriously, it reminds me of how, it reminds me that that you're just like me.
You're just a speck in the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot more. I mean, yoga is bigger than that, and it means lots of things to different people, right?
Yeah,
lots of things.
Yeah.
But to me, it's about coming back to breath, and that breath is about coming back to myself and coming back to the world.
But then how do you breathe? How do you get empathy from that? So these people who are racist and aggressive and violent, how do you...
But they're reacting to that violence and that racism because of learnt behaviour, and because they haven't actually had the chance to know themselves, right?
So for artists who are in this position of activism and game changing, it sounds like there's almost like two ways. There's almost like there's two type of arts activists. There's kind of almost like these bridge makers, these people that just want to kind of talk the conversations gently or make a space. But then there is room for, I mean, I have seen it happen, particularly when I was working in Western Sydney. There were some amazing, really arts activists, and they are making some big, important statements. And I think, you know, like in a way, like, I hope they don't go on the mat and breathe that like hardcore out either, but you know, it wouldn't be for me to make such a big statement. So like, is there a way we can be a bit more like inclusive of different ways people feel they've got to put their message out? I guess that's what I'm hearing, is that like, if that's the way she wants to put her art, her message through her art out in the world, that's okay. And if we can just hold firm in the way that feels right for us, like maybe she's a bit of a bridge maker and doesn't have to be
so hardcore
driving it home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's her prerogative to do whatever she feels, and I mean, ultimately, people show up in the way that they want to show up, you know, yeah. I mean, I think so. I don't know if all of us need to be that hardcore.
Yeah.
You know, but I think anger is what drives you to want to create change in the first place, right? I mean, you know, when you talk about I don't know if they're young people in Western suburbs that you were talking about that are artists, but I mean, young people who are just all ages, but you know, taking a young person that actually goes, God, this is wrong, and I'm being, you know, I'm not being treated right, and turns to art as a way of expressing themselves, is them being activists in their own right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, I think we just show up in the best possible way, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we can all do better, by the way.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing that. Like, I think your suggestions too, that like, if we have an opportunity and we have a platform, and I do know some creatives that really feel obliged to use their platform to make very firm stands, and I like really respect that side of it. So like, maybe like the suggestions you're making to like, well, maybe
I don't know. I mean,
just deepen the connection to
if
the
she has that,
story.
if that's what she's, if that's the
If it's
thing,
important.
if that's the thing that's not feeling right in her, but
Yeah.
or just feeling that, you know, I know a lot of creatives through the Mama Creatives community, obviously, and in my life I've, you know, hundreds of creatives actually, and some people pour so much into their work, and that's it. That is their contribution. They've got nothing left to give. There's nothing more, and that's what art has done over the centuries, really, is that creatives put everything into that process making, and sometimes that's enough, and then the discussion or the reaction. I mean, when you travel, you see beautiful artworks and architecture, and you eat the food of the cultures that have been there for thousands of hundreds of years. That is the way that we're carrying that tradition, and we're creating conversation. But if you want to take that more and take action, then you have to ask yourself what's not feeling right. And as you said, connect with other people to then bring that to life in another form.
Yeah,
So maybe you start with the artwork, the visual arts, and maybe, you know, you can collaborate, and maybe there's a film that can be made or a book that can be written, or you collaborate and you bring that art and you bring it to life in other forms if it's not enough. And then other people come into that, and that's how you create community. I don't know. And
you don't even necessarily have to recreate the wheel, you know. You can just join groups that already exist.
True, but if she's for this particular person to answer her challenge, if she's feeling that it's, you know, how do I address this with people? Maybe you just stand your ground and say, well, this is what I'm sharing with you, and you can react to it the way you want, or
and maybe she just needs
to move it along.
Maybe, yeah, or maybe she needs to ask that question back at them. What
not?
are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, look.
Yeah, this is what I'm doing.
This is what I'm doing.
But that's how you then collaborate.
Yeah,
you know, you can then partner and you can create it and bring it. If it's that sort of, if it's about the nature. It's about nature and the environment. So if it is a big issue, then she can
invite other people into the conversation.
She can bring other environmental activists who actually do that. You know, she can invite those bodies and communities in.
It is about finding a voice in what you stand for, though.
I think
that's probably what she's asking.
It's about finding a voice.
Yeah, and I think finding ways to do that is to delve deeper.
Yeah,
you know, and to find people that can help you do that, because ultimately what we're doing is we're finding our purpose, right? We're finding our purpose in how we show up in the world, and that can look like we all don't just wear one hat.
No,
we have many hats that we wear.
Exactly.
You know? So I just think delve deeper, find groups,
right?
Yeah, collaborate.
Yeah, if you're not feeling, you know, in yourself, if you are not satisfied and you're feeling a bit edgy or uncomfortable in yourself, then therefore search that, find it in yourself, get on the mat and take the breath or whatever it is that to connect with herself and try to understand what that angst is in her.
And maybe the flip side of that, if there is no angst and you're happy with what you're putting out, and that's what you feel is your role, then you can just stand and say exactly the same.
Done.
This is what I'm doing. This is my contribution to the conversation. I'm open to hear yours. Yep. I don't have to have both sides of the whole. I don't have to have the whole conversation.
I'm one person.
And what is it? Ordinary people. Oh, what's the quote? Ordinary people can do extraordinary things. It's ordinary people that actually do extraordinary things.
Yeah, true. I mean, absolutely. Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's enough. What you're doing is enough. And if you want it to be deeper, if you delve onto the mat and you breathe in and you want to go deeper, there are other ways without you having to, you know,
answer everything. But I think if you're an artist and you care about the environment and you want your work to stand for something, then the conversation does need to continue, and your artwork is the beginning of something.
Yeah, and I think we're forever evolving, you know. We don't just stand still and this is
It's not the answer. Yeah, it's evolving, exactly.
Yeah, totally.
So
I would say from a bland business point of view, though, if this is a value that is really running through your work, I would say from a business branding point of view, you do need to be very consistent about that, because if that's what you stand for, and then, you know, your opening night, you're giving people like your drinks out of plastic cups, and, you know, like, I do think there needs to be some consistency on, like, to be, like, you might not need to take it to that next level, but I would advise, if it's important to you, to
make it a lifestyle,
to commit to the story in some of your finer details as well of the way you're showing up as an artist in the world.
Okay, so there's connection and cohesion.
Of a bland bit of advice, but I think it's important because this is, again, Maya Angelou, is this thing is people will forget what you say or forget what you did, but they'll remember how you make you feel.
That's right.
And really, if we want people to connect to our artwork and the message beneath it, then we do need to be creating, like, through our whole brand experience.
That's a good point.
An emotional connection, and that really does come from, like, being consistent.
Yeah.
So that's the Creativity Couch today. I think we've answered that question in the time we've got. I want to end with one last question. What's your favourite C word?
Well, one would think it would be creativity or consciousness or even change.
But.
The
fingers are going.
You know, conspire comes to mind.
Wow.
Conspire, because I think about The Alchemist. What's his name? Paulo
Coelho. I'm reading his latest book.
Right, are you?
Hippies.
Oh, yeah. I haven't read that yet. But, you know, he says, what is it? You what you want, what you desire, go for what you want and you desire, and the universe will conspire.
Love
for
it.
you.
Love it. What's your favourite C word for
today?
Yeah.
Oh, I have it, and then I'm just like, now I'm just thinking about all the conspiring. What's yours? And then
Mine
I'm going to see
is-
if mine comes back to
Mine
me.
today is captivate, because I think you're very captivating. I've always found that about you. But I think
So
the idea of art and activism is to captivate an audience, and then if you captivate an audience, even if it's one person together, you can create change.
I like that.
And I think captivate is there's so much aura around that, and you want to be captivating, and you want to captivate people if you have something to share. And I think it's really important. Sort of, it's a big word. I think it offers a lot.
I'm going to go for a smaller word. I'm going to go for caring, because I feel
like
like
that.
this is about just having
Nice.
care in the way you show up as an artist in the world, and just maybe it's caring in the small details.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in the big way, but just to care about what you do and the impact it has on other people, I think, if you bring that into it. So I'm going to go for caring.
I love that. All right. Thank you. Thank you for listening. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Creativity Couch. Our next conversation is about memoir writing and staying true to your story, with our special guest Michelle Brown, author of published memoir This Kind of Silence. If you have a creativity challenge you would like us to chat about, then please send us a letter to letters@thecreativitycouch.com, and feel free to send us your favourite C word. You could win some pucker tea.